the Spirit Sessions podcast. I'm your guide, Katie Silcox, bringing you your weekly self-love soundbite. Join us, where I'll help you find your true spiritual home, where every single aspect of you is holy ground, holy ground, holy ground, holy ground.
This is a Spirit Session podcast with Katie Silcox. Venga chicos, empezamos.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hi everyone, Katie here. This podcast is intended to inspire you, educate you, and most importantly, support you on your journey towards knowing who you really are, that inner self, that inner teacher. I am not a psychologist or a medical doctor and do not offer professional health or medical advice on this podcast. If you are suffering from any kind of psychological or medical issue, please do the right thing and seek help from your qualified health professional. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Spirit Sessions. I am here with you to talk about a really cool way of framing human relationships and our own unconscious way of relating with other people. I want to front load this talk by saying, this has been one of the most powerful frameworks for understanding relational patterns that I've ever encountered. And that's why I'm doing a podcast, because that's what I like to do. I like to learn about cool things that have helped me get out of bad habits and share them with you. And B, I also want to say that I wanted to do this podcast because the zeitgeist holds a particular fandom right now around obsessing about who is a narcissist and who is gaslighting you. And, we're all kind of becoming educated around certain diagnostic terminology that I think for most of the population just isn't realistic. I do think that there are sociopaths, and it's not an opinion, well-documented psychological research shows that some people are psychopaths and sociopaths. Unfortunately, that number does seem to be growing, but it's a very small amount of people. Most people are not crazy cluster B type narcissistic sociopaths. Most people aren't. That being said, all of us hold tendencies towards these things. And when we learn about them, I think a more helpful model of approaching these labels is to see the way that they relate to us, to ourselves, rather than our knee-jerk tendency to project our own inner narcissist victim, perpetrator, and rescuer, which is what we're going to be talking about today, onto other people. Jung has this wonderful concept that luckily became quite popular in culture, which is a concept called projection. And projection is the way that we are unconscious of our own internal feelings and motivations and characteristics and personality quirks. And so because we're unaware and we haven't yet built the sense of self and integrity and personal resiliency to be able to see the truth of our full self, we unconsciously project it like a movie screen out in front of us in the form of the people that we work with, the people that we're attracted to, the people we marry, the people we date, the people we become friends with, the people who we get in business with. And we'll be able to see aspects of ourselves that largely remain in the shadow in someone else. And so that might make you feel annoyed, but that's just what I feel and what I think about the danger in labeling everyone else as the bad other. And it's a big deal. In our culture, what I'm seeing, not only when you look out into the media landscape, but also in the way, friends and students, the way that we relate with our fellow man tends to be in this really strong othering. So whenever we find ourselves in the experience of othering, right? I'm the good one, and my group, my in-group, is the good one. And you're the bad one, and your group is the baddies. We know that we are in a projection. We're in samsara. We're in a hall of mirrors. Because most people are really complex. And if we dig down to the truth of who we really are, we find that all of us have threads of murderer and saint, victim and rescuer, perpetrator and helpmate. We all do. So, A, B, and now I want to give C. One more caveat before we dive into this really cool frame for seeing reality. C is that we're going to talk about the victim, the perpetrator, and the rescuer triangle. When we talk about this, we are not talking about actual current victimization, meaning we're not talking about someone who is in an abusive marriage where they're getting emotionally or physically abused. We're not talking about someone who's walking down the street and gets mugged or held up at gunpoint. We're not talking about actual criminal victimhood, right? Those are very serious things, sexual assault, criminal victimhood. That's a different thing. If you're in a situation like that, and trust me, I've been there in certain moments of my life, you need to get help, and you need to get therapy, and you need to get support from people that love you, and you are a victim, and you need to get out, and then you can do the good work of dissolving the label of being a victim, because that's not who you really are. And it is incredibly harmful to identify as a victim forever. So, all that being said, in most cases, for most people, we are not in a criminally victim state, right? We're dealing just with the messy, everyday reality of humans doing human shit. And humans do wacky stuff, right? Myself included. I include myself, right? We are all wonderfully complex beings that have our blind sides. And so the definition of yoga is to make that which is unconscious in me conscious. And this triangle is really helpful in doing that in terms of your human relationships. So we're going to talk today about the drama triangle. The drama triangle is composed of, you can imagine in your mind's eye, a triangle. At the top, we could put the victim. At the left bottom point, we could put the perpetrator. And at the right bottom point, we can put the rescuer. And it's a psychological model that describes a dysfunctional pattern of interaction that we often can find ourselves in not super healthy relationship, right? And we're all dealing with those patterns. It was developed by a man named Stephen Cartman in 1968. And what he saw was that people were unconsciously shifting into these roles in their relationships, creating a lot of conflict and drama, which is why it's called the drama triangle, and emotional distress. It literally makes us suffer. And even though it was created in 1968 by Stephen Cartman, it really is reflective of the Buddhist idea, the yogic idea, the Vedic idea, of the Freudian idea of samsara, this repetition compulsion that keeps us spinning in the circle and cycle of life, where we're playing out roles as if on a stage. And we think that we are getting something from it, but we're actually getting a lot of emotional turmoil and stress. So here's the breakdown of how it works. And what's interesting about the drama triangle is that it's not a static thing. And so like when people come to Ayurveda school, they're always like, "Oh, what's my mind body type? What's my mind body type?" And it's the same with this. This isn't like a dosha. This isn't like a astrology type. This isn't like your numerology type. This is a pattern that you're comfortable with, but given the right circumstances, you can shift into any one of the three sides of this triangle. And we'll talk about how that works. And what's super interesting about it is that when you're in a drama triangle with someone, when you shift out of one role, often your partner, your workmate, your lover, whoever it is, your husband, they will automatically shift into another one. I'll give you guys some examples of the victim, the perpetrator, and the rescuer, what they are, how they move in real life, and then how we can get out of it. Because inevitably, we do not want to be, and we aren't, any one of these. These are mechanisms that we use to attempt to gain validation and control. So the first one is the victim, and the victim often plays the role of the helpless, oppressed, powerless one. They feel like they're poor me, they're at the mercy of other people and their circumstances, and they often avoid taking responsibility of their own situation. It is characterized by a feeling of poor me, and I'm smiling right now because I'm like, oh my God. I don't think of myself as a victim, but the more I've studied this, I'm like, oh my God, I play this role so much. It's so subtle and it's so insidious, right? It can show up in really subtle ways that may surprise you. I don't think of myself as someone that walks around talking about how terrible I feel or how my life is so bad, but it can be really subtle, like complaining or feeling like your life isn't what you had hoped for, that you're feeling put upon by your life. So it can show up in like a subtle way of like, ugh, I really don't want to do this today, right? How many of us feel that way? We're like, oh, I've got to like do taxes and go work out and like do my Ayurveda routine and work and answer all these emails. And it's like, there can be this really subtle victimhood there of like, my life runs me, I don't run my life. So it can manifest as like someone who is complaining all the time and talking about how like an Eeyore energy. And we all know that when we're around it, it's super annoying. Nobody likes being around Eeyore energy all the time. But it's not always that overt, right? Sometimes it's like in all of us, like this feeling of poor me or I'm being put upon. And as I said before, people can be a true victim of certain acute circumstances, right? But we're talking about the victim role as a psychological tendency, as a stance, as a way of we relate to our life and other people that actually, ironically, entrenches us more in the muck of dependency, helplessness, and suffering. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy. The victim avoids personal accountability for their life experience. When we start level 1 in Shakti school, we remind people this is a self-guided course. You and you alone are responsible for your feelings, right? And it's challenging. I'm not saying it's not challenging, but the way that we can start to, I think it would be helpful rather than, oh, I'm this or I'm that, to really see how we all have this tendency to show up in our lives as victims. A couple of examples, like say you have a coworker that constantly complains about their workload, but never takes any initiative to find a solution for it or communicate effectively with their manager about how things could shift, right? Or maybe in your family, one family member, it might be you, consistently speaks words of how wronged they are. They're the wronged party in every conflict. They blame others for their unhappiness. It can also show up as like, I'm always sick, right? I always feel ill. And it's not to say there aren't people that have chronic health issues, but it's this psychological stance of sickness, of illness. Or maybe in your intimate relationship, your partner, your boyfriend, your husband, your wife, she perpetually tells you that she feels like you don't appreciate her or understand her, and she constantly wants you to validate her. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to feel understood and appreciated and validated, right? But this, like, if it becomes like the dynamic of your relationship where it's like, poor me, I'm the misunderstood, unappreciated one, you might want to look at that, right? Like, am I in a stance? Am I in a psychological position that actually isn't true? Because all of us are going to be misunderstood and understood. We're all going to be underappreciated at times and appreciated. That's more what reality looks like. So that's the victim, right? Then you got the perpetrator, also known as the persecutor. This is the person in the relationship who takes on the role of bossy McBoss socks. They are the one who blames, criticizes, and controls other people. This may show up as like, oh, I'm just kidding, but really they're like joking all the time, but they're putting you down. I've experienced that before in relationship where I'm like, wait a minute, you're making fun of me all the time. If your partner makes fun of you nonstop, this is a low-level perpetrator role that they're playing. If they blame you, if they criticize you, if they put you down, this is a display of aggressive and manipulative behavior. And the perpetrator will often, sometimes this can be seen as like a narcissist, but a narcissist can also play the role of victim or, rescuer. And so the perpetrator really is characterized by someone who puts themselves above everybody, whereas the victim feels like she's or he is below everybody in the triangle. The perpetrator is the better one. He's right. He is driven by a need for power and control. But what that is actually doing is hiding this deep fear of their own vulnerability. These people are the most insecure, brittle, just not strong people on the planet. And they express their perpetration through overt or subtle aggression. But it can also be more subtle things like passive aggression, manipulation. But the main thing that you need to understand about the perpetrator is their driving modus operandi is power over the victim. And I'm not going to say power over you. They're power over the victim. Because remember, these are roles. These aren't real. Like, nobody is fully a victim or fully a perpetrator. So it's important we don't see people as only these things, but to see that we've taken this position. So, like, common example, a husband who uses guilt and manipulation or intimidation, emotional abuse, blaming other people, not taking accountability for their own actions, but blaming that person that they feel is less than them or weaker than them. It can also show up like a boss who needs to micromanage everything their employees do, constantly criticizes your work, creates a hostile work environment. Super uncomfortable, right, to be in that. But it can also be more subtle. It can be a parent that uses passive aggressive tactics to infuse guilt and manipulation into their children's decision making, right? So I think we can all see some of ourselves in both the victim and the perpetrator, but people will tend to have a role that they identify with more or that they go into more to gain this false power. And then at the third end of the triangle, you have the savior or the rescuer. This is the person that feels compelled to rescue other people, to save people, often at the expense of their own needs. They get a sense of self-worth from helping other people, but their actions can enable that victim's sense of helplessness and perpetuate the cycle. Now, the rescuer can also try to save the perpetrator. We see this all the time, right? Oh, my husband, he's emotionally abusive. He's trying to control me. He doesn't want me to see my friends and family. He doesn't let me go out in Lululemon pants because they're too tight, right? Oh, well, I don't want to leave him, so let's save him. Let me get him to read this book or take this course or go to therapy with me. And not that any of those things are bad, but if you find that you're trying to rescue your perpetrator, it's a really common setup. The rescuer's actions on the surface might seem really, really benign or helpful, but you need to look at this, right? Am I actually trying to change the behavior of a perpetrator, or am I trying to help a victim because I don't believe that they can do it themselves, or I don't really believe that they can take personal responsibility, or I want to actually keep control here. I want to feel needed, and I want the victim to feel dependent. Why? Think about it. If I'm the savior and I'm the rescuer, then you're the helpless victim, and I have this false sense of helping and power. This is so common. I know everyone listening to this is like, oh my God, this is my marriage. Or this is my, relationship with my brother or sister or mom. So that coworker that's always taking on extra work, right? And then they get burned out and resentful. Or a family member that's maybe always bailing somebody out financially, or the most common of this kind of codependency is enabling someone's addictions, right? That classic idea of the 29-year-old son that's still living in the basement and the parents don't kick him out, right? Because they are saving him. But what they're actually doing is harming him because he's never going to take the initiative. And really common, we see this in intimate relationships with a rescuer. It's really sad. We'll constantly make excuses for our significant others' harmful or shady or downright abusive behavior. So this is what it looks like, you guys. And I hope you feel my heart. The reason that I'm passionate about this is because I just feel like I want to create, maybe we'll do it. I want to create a t-shirt or a sweatshirt that says recovering drama queen. I know this triangle really well. And luckily I've been able to exit the triangle. And let me say that in a better way. I've been able to exit the triangle more consistently in my relationships. The goal, what's the goal? The goal is to not become and get, as Jung would say, captured by the archetype, that the archetype, these psychological stances don't own us, and we aren't taken under by them. We want to exit the triangle. That's what liberation is. And that's what Jung calls this integration of the self. And what that means is that, here's the deal. The triangle's not true. It's not who you really are. Who you really are is this deep, complex soul with at least 7 degrees of complexity. And when we're in the drama triangle, we're living from this very flattened dimensionality. It's a one-dimensional existence, and you're 7 dimensions or a million dimensions, right? And it just takes away every aspect of spiritual truth. So we want to break free from these drama triangles. We want to break these unconscious contracts, and we want to live authentically and speak from our heart rather than from these false power dynamics. What's super interesting in the brilliance of the drama triangle is that you don't stay in one role. It's like physics. It's like ice to water, water to gas, right? As one person shifts, the other person, the dynamic will unconsciously shift as well. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you are playing the role in this scenario of the victim and you're in relationship. I'll just do a common example, right? An intimate relationship, a husband and wife, we'll just say, right? Let's say the wife is the perpetrator. She's the more controlling, demeaning, sort of puffed up one who needs to like put everybody down and criticize everybody and tell everybody what they're doing wrong. And she's kind of like tracking the environment to see who's messing up, and then there might be a punishment. Like that's the perpetrator role. And then the husband is going to be the victim, right? And he's going to feel constantly like he's not enough for her, and yeah, just the victim, like poor me, she's so mean, I've married a tyrant. Right? And then what happens one day he's had enough, and he, in an effort to defend himself, he blows up, right? And he expresses all this anger, all this aggression, and he lashes out at his wife, and maybe he threatens to leave her and just starts to tell her everything he does for her, and he's blowing up, right? And now the victim has become the perpetrator. Someone who always feels victimized is eventually going to lash out and become the perpetrator. They might do it, like I explained, by screaming or yelling or threatening, but they might do it in a passive way, like sabotaging, right? Like there's these funny examples of women who've been unfortunately married to like abusive men back in the 50s where they couldn't get out of these marriages. They didn't have any money. They were really stuck, and they would like put hair remover in his shampoo, right? That is now shifting into the perpetrator, right? Sabotage, passive aggressive, gossip, essentially trying to find some sense of power over someone else who you feel is trying to get power over you. Yeah. So now the victim becomes the perpetrator. And what happens? The perpetrator might shift into the victim, right? Oh my God, you yelled at me. You put hair remover in my shampoo. You're a crazy psycho. Like now they're the victim. And you see this when you're a therapist, or you see this when you go to therapy, right? Like the partner who initially plays the role of the perpetrator might show up to therapy and completely switch the story to where they're now the victim of the other. I'll give you a common example. Let's say someone's putting you down all the time. You try to stick up for yourself by complaining, right? Stop doing this. And then the person says, oh, wow, I'm never going to be good enough for you. And now they shift into the perpetrator. Do you guys see why it's called the drama triangle? It's insidious. It's insidious. And the thing is, none of this power is real power. It's low level, first chakra, second chakra, third chakra bullshit. There's no heart. There's no magic. There's no true manifestation. There's no co-creation with your own inner and outer divinity. There's no hope, right? There's no belief in the divine. It's Dante's hell. That's really what it is. So victims build up resentment and frustration and eventually lash out. The perpetrator then becomes the victim, right? Another really common one, the rescuer becomes the victim, right? Somebody who feels they're constantly trying to save their partner, rescue them emotionally. I see this a lot in myself. I see it in a lot of my students because we're naturally very healer type people. And we want to heal ourselves. We want to heal others. We want to help people. You got to really watch if you're a helper. If you're a Ayurveda coach, if you're a yoga teacher, if you're a nurse, you're a teacher of any kind, you're a caregiver, we can fall into the rescuer, and then we can feel like a victim, right? Look at me. I've been helping you so much and you don't appreciate me. Look at me. I gave you money and you never pay me back. Look at me. I did this for you and then you were mean to me, right? Like at work. Oh, look at me. I do all the work for all the team and nobody helps me and now I'm burned out. So rescuer can become the victim. Rescuer can also become the perpetrator. It's the same story. The rescuer enables an addict's behavior. The rescuer enables her husband's emotional abuse by being there, by tolerating it. And then what happens? She finally can't take it anymore. She becomes angry and can start to be the very persecutor that she has in her life. She can start to, I've seen this with myself. I consider myself a pretty stable, loving person, but man, there's anger here. There's a way that if someone pushes you and pushes you, then your perpetrator comes out. When a rescuer feels that his or her efforts are not working, or that the person that they're trying to save is not taking their advice, they become livid. They become the persecutor. And if you're seeing yourself in this, just know it is so common. It is just like, it's like the way the world works. It's the way our politics work. It's the way our relationships often work. And it is 100% samsaric hell. It doesn't lead to true authenticity, vulnerability, individuation, spirituality. It leads straight to entanglements that create more entanglements, that create more entanglements, that create more entanglements. So, how do we get out of this? The key to exiting the triangle, if you will, is to see that you're in one of the nodes of the triangle. See it. Recognize when you are playing one of these roles. And you don't have to be in relationship with anybody, by the way, to be in one of these roles. Learn how to set really good boundaries, right? What you're willing to engage with and what you're not. Somebody else is in a victim role or a perpetrator or rescuer role, you can say, hey, I think you're in one of these roles. And I love you, and I'm going to step away. And when we're our full, wholehearted selves, we can come back. Communication is huge. Being able to express our needs, our boundaries, our feelings directly and respectfully without taking on one of these victim, perpetrator, or rescuer roles. I think the most powerful way of exiting is the first thing I said, and I want to develop that just a little further, and that is simply seeing that you're in the role already starts to dissolve the role. The active presence, the active awareness, as Dr. Ladd would say, is the digestive enzyme on this stuff. As soon as you, oh wow, I'm doing the victimhood thing, you wake up and it's like the Carlos Castaneda talks about exiting the dream. Like, oh, wow, I've been in the dream. I'm going to exit the dream. I'm not a victim. I'm not saving anyone, and I'm not going to attack. That seeing it already dissolves it, and you can even name it. You can say to yourself, or if you're in relationship, hey, I feel like I'm going into like a rescuer mode towards you. Like I want to help and save you, and I know that's not helpful, and you don't need saving. And I see that I'm doing that. And that's going to tell me, okay, I'm in the drama triangle. I'm not in my full integrated, adult, loving, fully spiritual / alive and embodied in the world self. I'm in this role. And then lastly, just taking radical responsibility for our own feelings. Acknowledging our role in our relationship dynamics and taking radical ownership of our actions and how we feel without wanting others to change so that we feel differently. And that may seem like, wow, that sucks. And it does, but this will enable us to have all 7 levels, and I'm speaking about the chakras, online. And from there, we can actually get wisdom. When we're in the triangle, we are in a one-dimensional perspective. We don't want to have one-dimensional perspective. We want to have like the full dimensionality. And so just taking a beat, taking a pause. And once you're there, you will be able to have the wisdom to be able to see what to do next. For those of us that tend towards the victim, this means moving towards self-reliance, self-validation, problem solving, feeling appreciation for the life that we have. For a persecutor, it means moving towards loving expression of needs and learning how to have compassion and empathy for others. For the rescuer, it means learning how to let them, right, as they say, take care of yourself and let other people take care of themselves. And empower others through allowing them to solve their own problems. And of course, you guys know I'm a big fan of one-on-one therapy, therapeutic help, because the drama triangle isn't usually created in your marital relationships or your work relationships. These are often patterns that we learn when we're really young, right? When we were kids, we definitely took on these roles. And so going back, doing that deep dive, learning like where these patterns may have come from can be helpful initially, and then releasing them all. I love this way of seeing, and keep a little triangle maybe on your refrigerator just as a reminder. You can write the names in there. And I hope this was an interesting lens for you to be able to see what might be going on right now in your relationships. As always, we are an Ayurveda school. Level 1 has kicked off. It is February, but we are still letting folks in. So if you missed the boat and you want to catch up, there's still time to catch up. March is an ideal month to join Level 1 because we have a whole week off, so you can catch up with us. Get in Level 1 if you're one of my Level 1 students. Level 2 starts very soon. April, Level 2 Ayurveda School. And guess what, you guys? Big news flash. Beep, 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 beep. We are having a live event this fall and spring of 2026 in the Bahamas. Bahama Mama. We're going to the beach. We're going to the Shivananda Ashram. They've invited me to teach a long weekend event. You can stay a couple extra days if you'd like. And we're going to do a full weekend on the chakras that I've mentioned a lot. In the fall, that's happening. And then in the spring of 2026, same thing, Bahamas, a full 5-day retreat on the chakras, yoga nidra, and the physiology of peace and relaxation. A lot of fun, cool stuff. So if you've wanted to study with me live and you like the Bahamas, which who doesn't, I hope you will join us. We will put some links for that in the show notes. All right, beautiful listener, are you noticing that I sound really good? It's because I got a new podcast mic. So those of you that have been listening to me and this podcast for years and putting up with our shoddy sound, I want you to know we've invested big time in our audio, and I'm so excited about this mic. It's awesome. So gone are the days of popping and crackling and outside sounds. So yeah, I'm super excited about the new microphone. So thanks for listening to the pod. I hope you subscribe and rate us 5-star review. It helps people find us. And hope to see you one day, if you're not already there, in one of our level 1 or 2 programs. Much love and happy exiting the triangle. A big special thanks to Kevin Carlisle of Goodbye Gemini who wrote this beautiful podcast music, and to DJ Juan Pablo Jimenez in southern Spain for mixing it and making it magic.